You know me, I don't need no introduction and shit.
What's up, everybody? 702 Exotic back at you with another video. Today we're going to be touching a very underrated topic, and that is electrical breaker and load calculations. We have formulas here and we're going to go over them with you, the calculation and the load calculations and how to get around that. So let's get to it. So this is how to simplify load calculations. On every single light, every dehumidifier, humidifier, AC unit, everything, you're gonna have a label in the back of that, right? And it's gonna tell you what it's asking for. So it's gonna tell you the amperage, it's gonna tell you whatever it's asking for. It's gonna have all the specs on it. It's what it's called. But if it does not have the specs, and you have some type of information, because you do need to plug in a certain type of informations to find out what amperage you're going to pull. And you need to know what voltage you're pulling to as well. So this is an example. You have two LED grow lights, right? 300 watts each. That's 600 watts. Now you have one dehumidifier that's pulling 500 watts. And you have one oscillating fan that's pulling 100 watts. Well, that's 1200 watts altogether. And the formula for that is if you're running on a 120 volt system, 1200 watts, you're going to divide that by 120 volts, gives you 10 amps. That is your amperage. Once you get your amperage, then that tells you the size wire you need, right? Because you're going to have a lot of different type of wires. You're going to have wires like these. This is for residential. And number 12, right? You see one conductor here, and a neutral and a ground. You're going to have another wire size. See, this is a 14 gauge, less amperage. And you notice there's more wires here. You have two hot conductors, one neutral and a ground. Then you upsize to bigger size wire here. One hot, one neutral and a ground. And then if you need to get even more power, then you upsize to something even bigger like this. You see one hot, and one hot. That's three-phase power there. Neutral, and the ground was added additionally. So now we know the amperage that we need by getting the information off the back, the wattage, and then the voltage that we're running, because you have to sometimes think about, if you're in a commercial facility, you need to know what voltage is coming in from the transformer, because sometimes you might have 120 volts coming in from the transformer, and sometimes you might have 277 coming out of the transformer. Depending on the voltage will give you a different amperage, because the voltage, if it's flowing faster to get it there quicker, it's less stress, right? So the amperage goes down, and that's why you divide. So that's one way to get your amperage there, and the type of wire that you need for the amperage, right? And then that's going to give you the next step too, breakers. Well, when you have a certain type of wire, you're going to need a certain type of breaker to go along with it. You see, that's another thing. Breakers. As you can see here, we have a panel here, and it has a bus bar. Let's take this breaker out of here. See this breaker right here? Just popped right out. It's a 20 amp single pole breaker. It just pulls one. It's called a single pole. This is a 20 amp breaker. 20 amp breaker, you could put it on a number 12 wire, but you can't put it on a 15 amp wire. And that's what I mean. The wire size has to be the same, adequate for your amperage along with your breaker. If those do not match, then you're going to have a lot of issues with heat. And let me tell you, a lot of growers have a lot of issues with heat because one of these things aren't correct. The wire doesn't match the breaker, all coming from the devices, right? Or lighting. So the lighting is asking for that load. The wire can't push the load through it, or the breaker doesn't have enough capacity inside of it to push the power. Because inside of here, there's a small little filament inside that breaker there. And when that filament swells up, it breaks a little lever. Pow! And the only way to be able to get that to go back, it has to swell. Temperatures have to cool down. And that's why sometimes you can't reset a breaker all the way. Or sometimes it's stuck in the middle. You have to go all the way back and then reset it. But every single breaker has a same filament inside of it. And if you upsize the breaker, which is a 50 amp, 20 amp, 50 amp, the filament inside is bigger, more heat. for it to trip this one. Now you notice this is a double pole. Now there's 2 coming out of here now. Also, another thing that changed was this here. This is a bolt-on. You can't put this breaker on here. It won't fit, and I'll show you why. On this bus bar, you don't have nowhere where you can screw this in. This is a commercial breaker. It hooks onto the side, but it doesn't go in. You got to realize too as well, you have commercial breakers and you have regular breakers. These regular breakers, they just called stab ins. They just stab right in. So you also have to know what type of breaker you're using and on what you're using it for. We're gonna come back to this in a second. This is your bus bar here. You have a single pole, 20 amp. You know what wire goes with that one. Then you have your 50 pole. Got to upsize the wire for that. See, we have a number 8, number 6 wire would be fine for this. And then you're gonna move up to something even beefier. This is your 100 amp, 3 pole, 3 phases. And that's for something like this. That's for something like that there. Has 3 phases, has 3 legs coming out of there now. You have your A phase, your B phase, and your C phase. And those right there go in between each other, just like so. You see, every time a breaker stabs in here, just like, you can't put this one on here because this is a bolt-on. This is not a bolt-on. But every time that goes on there, it connects to each of the phases. So you have every other one. So this is one phase and this is the other phase, and they stagger in between here. So that's another thing while you're checking your balances, make sure they're on the right balance. You know, I've even gone to growers where they turn off breakers and stuff like that and their balances is all off, because when they turn breakers to keep temperatures down, a lot of times they put all the load on one side, right? Because every other breaker, if you turn off every other breaker, then you're going to turn one side off, and so you're going to have all the load on one, and it's going to give you an imbalance on the big one right here. So one is going to take it all from down here, you know, from down here, your phases. All right, so there we go. So now we talked about wire sizes, talked about load calculations. We talk about single poles, 2 poles, even 3 pole breakers, single phase, 3 phase. Let's step into another specialty breaker. This is a GFI breaker here. Remember how we talked about in the very beginning that this breaker here, all it reads is heat. Well, now we're stepping into something more intelligent, right? With a little bit more brains inside of it. This is a GFCI breaker, and it has this little pigtail here that reads the neutral that's leaving, right? So this, as it's leaving here, it's collecting information inside this breaker, and it's like a heart monitor that reads the spikes up and down. So while this right here only collects heat, right, the filament inside that makes it the lever break, this here has actual like technology in it, like a motherboard and you know, dots and stuff like that. It has actual chip, like a motherboard. So this doesn't have nothing in that components, right? This has like old school components where it's levers, you know, like you know, levers. This actual has smarts in it, you know, like you know, motherboard. And it reads the electricity as it's going up and down. So when you have your hands wet, it doesn't necessarily trip the breaker, but you're getting shocked. This is enough to read that electricity drop. When you're getting shocked, it'll notice that electricity dropped, unnormal electricity voltage drop, and this will trip. It'll just turn off because it'll say something is going on over there. I don't quite know, but I noticed the electricity dropped for some unusual reason, and that's what these do. These are GFI breakers. You're also going to have GFI receptacles, right? You have these in your bathrooms, in your homes and stuff like that. Anywhere you're going to have water, outside receptacles, house receptacles, anywhere there's a sink, if you have a laundry room, anything that could be wet or you could be wet, it's going to have GFCI protection, right? Accessible GFCI. So like you can't put GFCI on refrigerators and stuff like that just because they're inside of a grow room, because they're not, if you make everything hardwired where you can't touch it, right? You can't access it. You can't physically put your hands in there or and be wet, you don't need to GFI. What you do need to GFI is outlets and stuff like that that you can get wet and touch. So anything in that nature has to be GFCI protected inside of a grow room. And another thing that we need to touch along too is boxes, right? So you have this here is a weatherproof box. As you can see, there's nothing that goes inside. Even the mounting brackets are mounted from the outside. There's actually nothing that goes inside. I remember the first time I ever mounted one of these, I put screws right through the inside to mount it. And they're, what are you doing? And I'm like, I'm mounting it on the wall. There's no, you can't screw through this. Then it breaks the waterproof. You have to mount them from the back. So that's a key thing. These little tabs are very important. And that's how you mount them to make it full waterproof. There's actually just a regular switch in there. But inside of grow rooms, when you have workers in there, you don't want them to be wet or anything like that and hitting a regular switch and getting shocked. And another thing is, the way you could tell is that this is a non-waterproof box here, and this could be outside of any electrical. You don't want these type of boxes here inside of grow rooms because they rust. Water can get them, unless they're in high places and they're accessible. You can replace them or stuff like that. Then it's okay, no problem. Just MC, you need to get work done. Lights are hanging and stuff. You can use these, not an issue, but just that they will rust. Not like these here. These are coated. These are powder coated, meant for harsher environments. These are not here, so that's something to keep an eye out for. These knockouts are not weatherproof. You have water can leak in. Even the covers as they go on industrial covers, anything in that sort of nature is not weatherproof. It's not covered by any water. You will get water inside of your electrical, so this is a no inside of especially propagation room and stuff like that. You want to have weatherproof boxes, water weatherproof boxes. That's a safe way to do it. Lasts longer. You don't have to keep looking at rust. It looks cleaner. So it's one thing to take a look at. And let's move on to another thing. Another thing that controls everything is contactors, right? So we're gonna have special things like sensors, all type of sensors that detect other stuff. But what controls everything? What goes after the breaker? After it leaves the wire, then we hit another station, right? Because in grow rooms, everything is automated. You're not going to be there to hit the switch. You're not going to be there to turn on the lights. You're not going to be there to water the plants. You're not going to be there to put on humidifiers, dehumidifiers, whatever sorts of natures that you're going to have, right? You're not going to be there for that stuff. So it needs to be automated. How are you going to check up on it when you're not there? How are you going to know that everything is functioning, that everything is going good? This is what we got to look at. We have to look at other contactors, relays, and those sorts of things, because that's what's going to give you the full automation to know that when the data that you receive back, you're cross-referencing with other grows, you're cross-referencing with your past grows and your futures. You're checking your VPD through your systems, and what works all that stuff is your contactors and relays, because those are the things that are going to be telling these breakers to turn on, right? Well, think about it like this. The breaker will provide power from the panel. So you get power from the panel, and then it hits the breaker. The breaker then leaves out of your proper size wire, and whatever wire you have. This is for commercial. See, it's coded different. Residential coded different. So it leaves out of here, and then it's going to hit the contactor. The contactor itself then actually has another wire that comes out of that. Those contactors, then those can attach to computers, right? Which is going to tell these to turn on and off for you. So it'll tell these to turn on and off, and that's going to be turning on whatever you connect to those receptacles, and those boxes will be weatherproof downstream. So that's pretty much really how you wire up a whole electrical system. But let's take a look at those contactors. I have something queued up here for you guys, and we're going to take a look what a contactor does. So these are how contactors look. And a lot of people can get very, very overwhelmed on contactors because they see so many in a box, right? Because here you see only 3 contactors. Like one wire comes in at the top and one wire comes in at the bottom. So 3 wires coming at the top, 3 wires coming at the bottom. And all they're doing is just making a contact. They're just making a bridge. Choom. And then something tells that to turn on, which would be something like this. This is a contactor that is a smart contactor, right? So now you can connect this to internet and control what what you want to turn on. So you have all these components out in the field, and all these wires go to a box, and this box connects to this. So your physical wire will connect to that. You see, and now you can connect those onto automations. You know, you can automate everything. So let's go back here. Let's go back here for a second, because this is your automation here. Now we're on computers. Computers can tell us data. Data could be logged. And that's how you're going to improve in anything. So that's all things you really need to think about when it comes to growing. I know sometimes when you're growing small, but you can really grow out of the small very, very fast if you want to do anything in this business. Because I remember my first grow, we were running like 8,000 watts or something like that, and we had extension cords all throughout the house until we actually dialed in the electrical. We pulled in our wire from the breaker. I think it was like 60 amps at that time. And it went to a Titan controller. And then that Titan controller allowed me to be able to hook up all my 8 lights to it. It was a game changer at that time. And it's essentially all it is pretty much just, you can buy those too, but that's just for lighting though. I recommend those for lighting. You know, because if you're growing a nice size grow, you're going to want a box to be able to connect all your lights to be local inside the room. You don't want to take all those circuits back to the panel or nothing like that. The best thing I would recommend would be from the panel, you bring your wire, something like this, right? But, you know, it's going to be encased in either conduit, flex, or just in Romex sheeting, something like this, already with the Romex, but just a bigger size wire, you know what I mean? So that's going to come out the panel, and you're going to just pretty much essentially just make a sub panel, if you will, right? So you bring it, boom, bring that wire, and you're gonna take it to the actual local location grow room, and you're going to have another little panel that's going to, you know, tie your break. I mean, this will be fine. You can get one at Lowe's for like $100, right? So just get a 60 amp panel, take it all the way to the grow room, connect here. Then you connect your individual breakers, right? Connect your individual breakers, and then out of those breakers come out wire. That wire goes to your contactor you're seeing on your screen, right? And from that contactor, you'll be able to control whatever you're controlling. Say you have a dehumidifier, right? The dehumidifier electrical comes to that contactor. And then it'll tell you, oh, that contactor is pulling this is pulling that. And then so the dehumidifier company as well should be able to give you information with their softwares too as well. So, and yep, that's how you do it. Through these contactors, you'll be able to control whatever you want to control. Could be lighting, humidifiers, dehumidifiers, watering systems through the contactors. You got your breakers, your amperage, wattage. You know the formula for that. All you really have to do is just pretty much get your wattage, right? Divide that with your voltage equals the amperage. The amperage then tells you the breaker size. The breaker size then tells you the wire size. That's all you need to know. That's all you need to know. But if that wasn't simple enough and you have more questions, go ahead and call that number 702-530-2750. And this is your man, 702 Exotic. To the next one. This is your man, 702 Exotic. Make sure you hit that like button, subscribe to the channel if you want to watch another video like this.